Can you guys hear that?
I don't think you have volume sharing on.
I can't hear it, yeah.
If you just shared your screen, then the volume doesn't come through. You have to share the application.
Christopher, are you able to hear us?
Hello, everybody. I must say the video you have of Subliminal up, the music is pretty loud. I can't hear people over it really. Thank you.
Is that better?
Also, sorry, please don't stare at me eating my dinner, guys. I need to eat my food. But I tried to finish it before this, but I couldn't. Actually, you know what? I can just turn my video off. Wow. Mind blown.
I'm really excited for this. Subliminal is such a great game. I have a lot of questions
Me
about how
too.
that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming, Christopher Floyd.
I'm not sure that he's in yet.
Mr. Floyd.
Oh, there we go.
Yay! Hello, welcome.
Is this putting sound out?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, does it sound like it's coming from here and not from over here?
Tap one of them. We do not hear that tap.
You don't?
I don't think so.
Also,
Okay,
that screen sharing is still a little loud to whoever's playing it.
Is that better?
I cannot hear it at all. That's all right. We're about to get started anyways.
Yeah.
I think you've turned your mic off.
Christopher, are you comfortable with us recording this?
Sure. Does
Thank
this sound
you.
like it's working now?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, you sound
Okay.
fine.
Okay, good. As someone
Yeah,
who
sorry,
is,
we've been trying to get in the habit of recording meetings so that the people that are in class during the meeting or etc. can watch them back.
that's
Thank
cool with
you.
me. Yeah, as someone who never ever uses Zoom, how do I make it so that I can see everybody instead of like I have like a top 5 best friends at the top of the screen right now. And I don't know,
Click
it looks
the
like there's
gallery
more than
view
that.
in the top
Gallery
right corner.
Oh, yeah, cool, thank you. Great. For some reason that disappeared a moment ago, but I'm glad that it's back.
Well, we're super excited to have you here. We're gonna get a few more minutes for people to come in, and then we'll get started.
We'll wait until 6:05.
Mhm.
In the interests of my love for awkward silences, I'm going to mute myself and turn my video off. Just give me a shout when you want me to start. I'll be around.
We'll do.
Sounds good. Yeah, no judgment. I'm finishing my dinner up, so.
All right, I think we're ready to get started then.
I don't have any preparation for starting the meeting. So, Harper, you can
All right. Well,
introduce him, or he can introduce himself.
Who?
this is the executive. He's popped out for a second in the interest of awkward silences, but we'll be interviewing the executive producer of Superliminal today. This is Christopher Floyd. Should I call you Chris or Christopher?
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
Whichever one you like.
Awesome.
Either is fine.
In that case, so how this is essentially going to go is I'm going to ask a few questions that I prepared. Anyone in the club is welcome to interrupt me and ask their own. It's just kind of get things started, and then I'll leave it to the rest of the club members to keep going. So to start off, the question I always like to ask any game developers, any practice game developers, is how did you initially get into the industry?
Good question. Hold on, let's fix my balancing a little bit here. Hello. There we go. Yeah, so I kind of depends how you define it. My first video game related job was doing customer telephone support for Electronic Arts for their French customers. And that was in 2011, I think. And then I got, let me see. So then I started doing, I wanted to start writing about games. I wanted to just like, kind of like wanted to do something. I was kind of bored, and I thought I'll just start writing sort of like reviews of games and thinking about like what I like about them. And I'm sure the kind of dumb stuff that all of you do either in your head or somewhere real at the moment. And then I got a job doing QA at Vicarious Visions, working on Skylanders Swap Force. That was 2012, I think. And saw that through ship. I was there for like just under a year, I think. And then during that process, I wanted to try and figure out, it's kind of like, okay, I really want to do this for a living, and I hope none of you end up doing QA, but also it's good. It's good to learn a lot of stuff, but I didn't want that to be my career in the industry. So I started I used a lot of the stuff I'd done when I was doing my writing. One of my things was I ran a weekly interview column with game developers, and lo and behold, the easiest ones to reach are the independent game developers because they don't have PR people telling them not to talk to anyone else. So,
Yes, we've noticed that as well.
Sure. So I got to know a bunch of people through that, and then the summer of 2012, I was like running up to that summer. I'd helped to organize for the Boston Festival of Indie Games that happens at MIT, and let me see what happened. Then that September, trying to get this straight in my head, that September or August maybe, the Indie Mega Booth, which I think doesn't exist anymore. I think it died just last year and mid last year or something. So the person who ran that, who I'd spoken to before, got in touch with me and said, hey, would you like to help me with all of this stuff? And I said, sure. So then I started working at the Mega Booth, and that's it. So I guess in summary, I don't really know when I started, and I know that I have now started, but it wasn't very clear for a long time what that was going to be. So
If you were to like start all over again from the top and try to find a new job with like no background, how would you go about doing that?
That's a really good question. So I saw someone talk about this recently, and I think it's probably good just to state it for the record, since all of you are probably pretty impressionable and hoping that I'm going to know the answer, and I don't know the answer. But there's a whole thing about how like the advice that anyone gives you about what worked for them is kind of like mostly useless, because one, it's like trapped in a time that you can't get back to, and two, it's like locked to a series of chance encounters that made something work for them. I think the best thing that you can do if you want, it depends a lot on what your aims are. If you want to be the kind of person who has like a reasonably powerful, let's say like MSI laptop or something, and you make loads of really cool and weird experimental things, there's really nothing stopping you from doing that today. You should probably just hang up this call and go watch some tutorials and do stuff. If you want to get a job in like the real industry, which I think increasingly doesn't really make any sense, then you just want to get to know as many people as possible. I think, as I understand it, are all of you, is one thing I wasn't totally clear on, are all of you studying video games, or are you just in a club at college for your love of video games?
So our
Yes.
college doesn't actually have any specific degrees for game
Mhm.
design or anything. So most of
Yeah.
us, I believe, are computer science, but it
Cool.
broad.
There's a
broad
couple of
background.
us that are other majors. Like I am an art major, and I do a lot of animation and digital artwork, and I hope
Cool.
to work in the art side of games.
That makes sense. So that's good. I think if all of you are here, not because you are obliged to, but because you want to be, then it is incumbent upon you to prove me right by all of you becoming very successful video game people. In my experience, I don't know. I think if you want to do it, the best thing to do is just to start doing it. Like no one has to give you permission to do it, and assuming at least some of you are on computers right now and haven't found weird and wonderful ways to dial into this call, then you all have exactly the same tools that you would need to make anything. So just go do it. It gets easier over time, but it's never actually easy. And the more people that you know that are also suffering, the better, because then you don't notice how bad it hurts, and also they can help steer you out of the really sore parts when they happen.
In theory, maybe our collective success as a club, when we graduate and go into the real world, will bounce off of each other, and hopefully
Yeah.
these connections will last a long time.
Very much so. Like there's, for example, whenever I was at Vicarious Visions, there was a guy called, well, I won't name him. There was a person who shall remain nameless, so no one knows who it is, who was interning there, and he was there for maybe, I think he was there when I joined and his internship ended, or it was the other way around. Like we overlapped in some very tiny way, and we got on very well. And then you leave the job and you're like, oh, he was cool. Probably never see him again. And then I've like ran into him. I ran into him at like a GDC a couple of years later, and then about a year ago, well, 2 years ago now. I always forget that last year didn't really happen, but the year before, the year that didn't happen, I found out that like one of my friends used to work with him like every single day. Like he moved out to a studio in Colorado, and so when people tell you the industry is small, one, that is true, and two, it's true for every industry. So like, don't think that video games is different. Try not to make a living out of bad mouthing people or just lying about things you didn't do, because it becomes clear pretty soon.
So you were the executive producer for Superliminal, correct? That was like
Yes.
the title. What does that entail exactly?
Well, yeah, as I'm sure you're all aware, on a small team, it doesn't really mean anything. Well, I mean, it kind of does, but it kind of doesn't.
Or it means a
The
million things, right?
Yeah. The reason that, I think my title in the credits is executive producer and designer, or designer and executive. I don't know. Anyway, that we had like 3 designers, including me, and I was in some ways the least designer and also in some ways the most designer. I was, so how do I put this? So Albert, who like Superliminal kind of began as a college project for him. And I don't know. This is the most painful thing for me is when I talk to college age kids or younger, it turns out that if they knew of the game, they knew of it when they were like babies and have become grown adults in the time that it took to finish. It was a 7-year process for anyone who wasn't aware. But so whenever I came on the team, which was I'd known the team in various forms for like a little while, and I came on it about 3 years ago at this point, which was 2 years before it came out. And basically no one on the team had like real experience, and they were a bit lost. They kind of had like a cool idea and a bunch of cool ruminations on that cool idea, and then like not really anything that tied it together. Like it didn't really have like a like the levels didn't really necessarily flow together. There wasn't any overlapping story. Like there was, if you imagine like it wasn't this bare bones, but if you imagine like 12 sort of tech demo levels, that's kind of what it felt like. And so when I came in, my goal was to not was to not like take over the project, but also I wanted to like, you have to hurt it to like make it get better. So I was sort of sat with Albert a lot and spent a lot of time saying like, it's not my goal to, I'm not going to tell you what this game should be. You know, I'll tell you things that I think would be cool, but ultimately this has to all come from you because it's your project, right? Obviously everyone on the team is contributing their own bits and pieces. And then the executive side of executive producer is mostly to differentiate from, there are producers whose only job, and you'll see this almost exclusively in AAA, like it doesn't really happen on the indie side because most teams can't really budget for someone who does this, but in the AAA side, a producer can often be someone whose like only job is to schedule meetings, you know, sit as the person who kind of runs the meeting, you know, take all the notes, like Harper said this, Gene said this, and then, you know, chase up with all of you later about like, oh, so you had like some problem with art. Have you spoken to Garrett about it? You know, and you're like, oh, I haven't had time. You're like, okay, well, you know, it's like that's a very useful job. Like you're kind of the one who has to keep all the stuff tied together. And I definitely did parts of that. But the more like executive side is that I was like dealing with all of the business side of things, and, you know, the epic exclusivity thing, you know, those things don't happen by accident. So like that was that was stuff that I was working on in tandem with Albert, but more so like I was doing the business, he was doing the creative. We were overlapping on bits and pieces, and then there was we had 2 artists, another designer, that was like the core team, and then we had a composer and sound designer, one guy in Australia, and I'm not forgetting anybody, am I? We had some people we brought in towards the end, but they weren't like on it the whole time.
Right.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, of course.
Yes.
Sorry. So, Christopher, whenever you're saying designer, what does designer mean for y'all? You got, oh my gosh, sorry, Alabama coming out. For your specific team, what does designer entail?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And so, yeah, for some clarity, I don't know how much was like pre-discussed, but so I live in Seattle, and Seattle is like a pretty healthy hub for the game industry. You know, obviously we have like Nintendo here and Valve and folks like that, and loads of tiny studios and like everything kind of in between. And I know lots of people who are designers, and there is such a weird spectrum of what that means. Like there are people I know who are, so they're like, this is probably like a stereotype, forgive me for this, but so they're like really into D&D, right? And so like they love like designing like they're obsessed with like encounters, like how something would work. Like, so if you've got like 3 people and they fight this thing, and you got to make sure that like this value is this and this and this, and like these things will overlap, and like all that kind of like very systemsy stuff. Then there are people I know, like I worked with a guy at Oculus, who he had previously been a technical designer somewhere else. And so I was always like, what does that mean? Because that's kind of close to what an engineer, I guess. So the whole thing is, it's
Yes,
mostly all made up jobs.
that's something I've struggled with. I'm graduating in May, and so I'm starting to like look at jobs. I mean, I've been
Yeah.
looking and dreaming about them on Indeed for years, but but in my journey of looking at them, I'm always like, every single studio and company calls their jobs a different thing, and like a producer at one studio could mean a totally different thing at another studio. Same with like designer or
Yeah.
everything.
So the best thing, actually, recently I was talking to a bunch of friends, surprise, surprise, designers, about how difficult it is to make a portfolio as a designer, because a lot of what you do, not always, but like depending on the kind of design work you do, it can appear very nebulous. Like, you know, if you've ever heard the concept of like finding the fun, like that's not really a thing that you can like put on a page. But I saw someone recently talk about the person, well, in the conversation we were talking about, they brought up this really good point that was said, like when you're interviewing for a design position or you're interviewing a designer, instead of saying like, you know, I did design on this game, right? And they're like, cool, what does that mean? And especially you're thinking like a team of, you know, 200 people, you know, if you were the designer on a game, it's like you were not the only designer likely. So can you like very strictly define what you did and what that meant? And the way they said was really good was, this is why I recommend that all of you, if you haven't already all put games on like itch or spent your $100 to put them on Steam, please, 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 please do this. Like, it is so, you live in a world, in a time when you can do literally anything, and it's so easy, and no one really knows what boundaries are anymore. So just do it. Like, put your game on Steam, and if you're applying for like a, you know, I will assume all of you are going to apply for like, you know, entry level starter positions or whatever. If you're looking for like junior roles, if you're up against someone who's like, again, no disparaging to D&D. If you all like D&D, that's great. Please continue liking D&D. But if they say like, oh, you know, I've been DMing my own D&D thing for like 4 years, right? And you're like, that's pretty cool. Like, that takes a lot of work. You know, obviously, assuming your friends are enjoying it, if it's been going on for multiple years, hopefully you're doing a good job. But if you're able to go, oh yeah, I do that. Oh yeah, and also like I've shipped like 3 games on Steam over the last year, and you know, obviously they didn't do super well, but you know, I did that. That's really impressive. Like that's what gets someone to go, okay, cool. This person is like ready to move, because it's not, like I said, no one can stop you.
That's definitely, I think, something that all of our development teams every semester struggle with the most, is that last 10% of the timeline, getting things actually in a playable format and posted somewhere for the community and the world to see.
And that is my, coming back to the reason when I joined Superliminal 2 years before it shipped, that's my like favorite thing on earth. I love performing surgery on things. And so like sitting down and going, okay, which parts of this are fun? Which parts of this are not fun? Are they not fun in a way that is incurable? Are they not fun in a way that, you know, something very subtle might change them, like that, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, the design stuff I did was like, I don't want it to sound like stupid and made up, but like I came up with the idea of making the game like a video game, basically. It's like, rather than being like, it wasn't ever supposed to be, as I understand, like a dry puzzle game, but giving it the wrapper. And like one of the things I talked to Albert, I remember, is like sitting down at a coffee shop one night, and kind of saying like, who is the person who plays this game? Like, what are they like? What do they do? How do they think of themselves? What are their favorite games? What are you know, and all this kind of stuff. And then basically reverse engineer that amorphous blob into like what it is, right? And a good thing that I recommend for that always is, whenever you're trying to think about, like, let's assume after this call you're super inspired and you you've never used Unity before, which makes no sense to me, but this will be your first time, and you open Unity app and you go new scene, you're like, what am I going to make? That's really, really hard to pick. So start by going, what do I not want to make? And then just score out a bunch of stuff that you do not want to do. That is so effective at like shrinking down what you're working on. And that was like a big thing that I think Albert, like, who was, like I said, sort of in control of the thing, he was very much like reluctant to, for example, like make a bad decision. Like he didn't want to choose a thing, and then, especially because there's only 5 of us and we had limited time, limited money, like you don't want to make a mistake. But you actually do want to make a mistake like as soon as possible. Like the best thing you want to do is like sit at a fork in the road, and then instead of trying to figure out how you can find out which is the best fork, just do one. Like just do one, and it will either be totally fine and you'll like you just got it right first time, or you will realize it's wrong and be able to back up and go the other way, or you will get halfway down there and go, actually this is fine, and if we just make this other detour over here, it's going to work out. Like the human brain is pretty good at firstly thinking that it made good decisions in hindsight, and secondly rush finding answers to things that need to get answered. So I'm very much like a just go, and it's pretty low stakes at the end of the day.
Yeah, being indecisive can.
Yeah, I was gonna say, modulus some massive
yeah.
disaster, you like no one's gonna hopefully die from a bad decision that you made, right? If your game sucks, like it sucks. That's it. Like, it's pretty low damage, so I recommend it.
And then
That actually feeds well into a question that I had, if that's all right.
Mhm.
What you talked earlier, you said you came in and you hurt the game to make it better. Earlier, you said you're performing surgery. What are some things that you look for as these productivity traps? How do you decide what to throw away, and how do you make decisions on what to avoid?
That's a huge thing. It's a huge question in terms of like, feel free to focus me down on this. I'll start with like the most vague thing, which is like, I don't know how to put this in a way that doesn't sound stupid, but like, if you have 5 people on your team, or like any small amount of people, and you don't have infinite resources and you don't have infinite time, then every single time that you're not making the game, time is being lost. And if you are, for example, having 2-hour-long stand-ups every day, as you get around what everyone did and what everyone's doing, and again, like, does Gene need to chase up with Harper, or like, all of this stuff, that's super, super expensive. That's like a quarter of your day is completely lost. And then you've also, as I'm sure you're all aware, you've then got like the following on ramp of, okay, the call is over and my brain is full of like nonsense fluff, and now I have to like remember what I'm supposed to be doing, get into that gear, and then before you know it, Harper's like, hey Gene, do you want to talk about that thing real quick? And you're like, Jesus Christ. So I'm a big proponent of autonomy, and like that to me is kind of feeds into the like making mistakes thing of like, don't worry that everything you're doing is not 100% productive all the time. Like the functional truth is that if you knew, like with Superliminal, I think a good example is the final version of that game that came out in November of 2019 was mostly made in about a year, right? It wasn't that it took 7 years to make every single polygon and every single line of code. It is that most of it was like there. Well, the good chunk, the fun chunk was there at the start, and then it took 7 years to figure out what stuff was like a waste of time, and all you get from that is like, you just got to keep throwing stuff into my friend calls it like doing like the fun mines. Like you just got to go in and like hammer against the fun mines until you find a bit of fun, and then you bring it out there and see if it's any good. So yeah, I think like good planning is good, obviously. Like being organized is super useful, but being over organized is not useful. Like you need to always have room for a great example is actually our level designer Logan unfortunately got a concussion towards the end of us finishing the project, and so he couldn't use a computer, and that was pretty scary. And so 20% of our team was no longer able to do any work. But because we were mostly okay with it. It was fine, right? It meant that like anything that was related to him was like, well, that's not going to happen for shit. So we'll just mark it down and fix it later. But you know, things like that are good because again, unless you are super duper ultra clairvoyant, you cannot tell what's going to happen. So yeah, my advice is like, do lots of stuff. Get really comfortable with the idea of all of the things you do being thrown away. Thing I like to talk about a lot in regards to that is that there are something like 20 story drafts for Superliminal, and they're all in my Google Drive, and each one I think is pretty good, but that doesn't matter because they didn't work, right? For one reason or another, right? And like I think the best way to approach it is always it's very hard when you're early on and it like you really want to prove yourself and like nothing sucks more and this will probably happen to at least one of you given how many people are here. But you will join a company, you will work on a game and the game will be canceled and you will have nothing to show for it and it will absolutely suck. The reality is that no game studio that is good will ever hold that against you, right? They know like cynically, let's say like 75% of all games end up in that category somehow. And so you just gonna dust yourself off and move on, but always be motivated by what can I do? Like, how do my abilities, tools, whatever that is, like, how can I make these things make this thing better, right? And I don't care about them making me look good, although obviously you will, and obviously you do, and that's totally normal, but like try to abstract yourself from that as much as possible and be like, you know, even though I think this piece of art would be really awesome to have in the game, and I think this character's super cute, if everyone thinks it's absolutely garbage, then like I just have to accept that even though they are wrong, it's what we're going to do, and then just go forward with it and try to not take things super personally because you will. I mean, and especially if you're in small teams and everyone's doing like 29-hour days or whatever, you'll start to take everything a little bit personally. But yeah.
Sorry to ask two questions in a row. If that's
Oh, it looks
Yeah,
like.
do it.
Oh, Daniel also has a question.
I'll step out of the way then. Go ahead.
Oh, well, you can ask another since you also asked that one. If you want
No,
to.
don't do this. I'm stepping out of the way.
Are we
Daniel, give
having
us the
decision paralyzation? Oh my god.
Absolutely, it's a demonstration. But I wanted to ask, how do developers typically like find composers for their games, people to make music for it?
Good question.
That is a good question. Here's a great, horrible secret. As soon as anyone finds out that you're working on a video game and there's an email address to get in touch with your studio, thousands upon thousands of composers to a level at which you do not understand exist in the world will start getting in touch with you and saying, hi, we'd like to do composition for your game. And it's really weird. It's the only discipline this happens with. I don't understand.
Oh, that's so discouraging, Daniel.
I think it's because are you a composer? Is that what this is about?
Yes.
So so to be clear, I think the hardest part is I think it suffers in a way that is not entirely dissimilar to art, but there is a relation here where people kind of devalue it because they think it's like, well, it's not the coding, which is the ultimate coolest part of all video games. What is super useful if you want to get into composition is get, like, obviously be good at composing. That's probably like the fundamental thing to be good at, but learn like every tool and be super good. Like the most valuable people I've worked with in audio are the ones, and I also have a bit of an audio background. So it's like near and dear to my heart, is people that you can kind of like, if you are a technical designer, whatever the hell that means, like I know how to do stuff in C#. That's like my level of engineering talent. But I never want to be left alone with it. But as long as you can talk to someone about something like Fmod or Wise and be able to firstly talk about something more than just B flat major is a really good key, and I think that's the key we should use for this song, you know, but be able to go like, hey, I had this idea and we could do this thing, and I thought like if we bring in these parts, and like a really good example I think is whenever we were looking for the composer for Superliminal, I knew that Albert wanted this cool jazz soundtrack. And the other thing, I hope that you're part of this crew, Daniel, is that all composers super duper love jazz because it's the funnest thing
Yes.
to write for. You get to
Yes.
be super creative in a way that you can't as easily in other genres, I feel like.
Hmm.
And we had 3 people in mind we wanted to work with. We tried them all out, and it was really annoying, but I'm telling you this because it's really good to know. The one that we ended up hiring was the one who did the most show-offy application I've ever seen. And I was so annoyed by it because I hate it whenever someone's like a real like nerd. And you're like, oh, this is actually really good. And so 2 of them sent us completely great, cool jazz pieces, like, nice piano, a little bit of double bass, all that kind of thing. And Matt, who ended up working on it, sent us that, and then within like a couple of days said, oh, I got thinking about it, and I was telling you about how much I thought fmod could work. Anyway, here's an fmod project with like the track in it and all the parameters set, and you can just go in and tool around. Anyway, if you have trouble getting it working, let me know. And I was just like, god damn it, like that's it. I'm fired. And he was great, and that kind of thing where he wasn't. And to be clear, like there are plenty of studios where if you just want to like sit down in front of Cubase or whatever all day long, you can do that. But
Mhm.
that little like extra hattedness of being able to go, hey, here's a bunch of like cool software things we can do that you guys have heard of, but I know how to use. Like that's really exciting. And it was great. Like I got super excited. I did all the like audio implementation for the game. So like I would work quite closely with Matt because Matt weirdly was amazing at fmod, amazing at composition, but like couldn't use computers. It was very strange. So he would like send me stuff and be like, okay, make sure you hook this attribute up to here and this to here and this to here. And we had to build a bunch of fmod scripts and things. But if you're not doing that already, I highly recommend it. And as far as I recall, if Wise isn't free, like fmod is until you're over some income threshold. It's not going to happen to you anytime soon, I don't think. So
Okay.
don't worry about it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Christian, now it's your question again.
Yes.
Yes.
I realized I sounded a little bit edgy when I told you to ask your question. Daniel's a great guy. We're friends. I think so. I was going to ask, as far as in your production role, tool use. Now, I know you railed against the stand-up meeting, which I think you're a hero for. How do you feel about other tools?
They are useful.
I'm sure they are, but
really, really useful compared to everything else.
As far as like DevOps stuff, like
Mm-hmm.
continuous integration and testing and automated stuff. And
Yeah.
on the other side of that, how do you feel about Kanban boards and, the kind of kitschy, like, just like the standard, we're in industry stuff.
Yeah. So sorry, I'm just going to put a light on because I realize it's getting kind of dark. So I'm going to try and do that from this phone. And I think it's going to work. It always makes me sign
So
in.
fancy.
Hang on. Hey, it did it. Okay. So from a DevOps perspective, I have about as close to zero experience with that kind of like live ops side of things. But from a testing perspective, depending how you want to call that, myself and our team was there was like an even divide, maybe slightly off balance divide between wanting to test the game with people all the time and wanting to not test until this thing is ready, which doesn't mean anything and just goes on forever. So I'm a big fan of constant testing. In terms of production software, like scheduling software, whatever you want to kind of categorize that as, in my experience, they are all the same, give or take. Ultimately, if you learn how to use one and someone drops you in front of another one, you'll be like, 2 weeks or something before you have figured out all the stuff that it does anyway. The lighter weight that stuff can be, the better, again, unless your job is just to do that all the time forever. Which I don't. Again, if you work at Bungie or something, I think that's quite real. Like that's what you would do for a living. But what I want is like the fastest way to figure out what is late, what is done, and whatever's in between those things, and get it taken. I keep picking on Harper and Jean because they're the two names that I saw came into this chat. Like, so Jean's like, "Oh, this art thing is ready," and Harper's like, "Cool, I will integrate it now." And I'm like, "Great, Jean, you're no longer working on that. You're working on this thing. Harper, get that thing in today so we can take a look at it later. Done. Like that's it. And then if it goes wrong, it's on Harper to fix it or to find out who needs to fix it or let us know the next day that we need to it needs to go back for tweaking of some respect. For Superliminal, I wanted us to use Trello to ship. Again, because it's just super basic. Like the way I look at it is I want something that is so lightweight that you just never even use it for anything. Because like that way it just doesn't get in the way. Versus things like Jira, I kind of want to like subsume everything else. We ended up using Hack and Plan, which honestly, I don't think any of us liked by the end of it. It's very complicated and it kind of like, I don't know. I mean, maybe I would encourage you all, since you're free and easy and can do whatever you want with your lives, to experiment with making a project starting with Hack and Plan from the start. Because if you haven't looked at it, it just has like, you can like integrate your story stuff into it. You can like, if it's all like spliced by department, and I can sort of see a world where it might work, but I felt like most of the time it just really got in the way. Like we would waste not like hours of time, but we would lose time on, is this task in like this board or this board? And hang on, like, so there's a comment from Harper on it. I'm going to pick on someone else, Logan. And, Logan didn't realize that he didn't get a notification for it because like he's not attached to it. And I was just like, all this stuff. I was just like, this sucks. Like, I hate this stuff. But, I mean, ultimately the best production software is like no production software, but I don't think that's really effectively true outside of maybe a 2-person team. Like I think even working on your own, I made a little crap game on Steam you can look up called Starship Clicker. It will just completely reinvent the way you look at games forever. But even that, I had like a Trello board with, I mean, I made it in like 6 days. So it had something like 40 tasks on it, and it was just a matter of knowing that these things still have to happen and just sweeping things off the board as I got done with them. So that's my perspective.
I'm not going to monopolize this time anymore, but I actually do have one more question because I wanted to know what your biggest takeaway from Starship Clicker was, because I know that you had said that you were researching long tails. Basically, I did my homework, and I wanted to know, what exactly you got out of that project. How did that change the way that you look at managing like community outreach or
For
long
Starship
tails?
Clicker, I mean, the thought with it, I don't know where you read up on it, so it would be probably useful to know that a little bit. But
Your website.
Oh, it is on my website. Jeez, I don't even remember that. That's good. That's good that
The
I'm
eternal
logging that
struggle
stuff
of remembering to update your website.
But that whole thing came out of, so I also run a co-working office in Seattle for the game industry. It's called Indies Workshop. When you're all vaccinated and you're in Seattle, please stop by. I think we have to be vaccinated
that sounds
too,
lovely.
but I'm sure it'll be fine. But that was born out of like I think we read a Gama Sutra article that was talking about how some guy in Canada, I think he was Canadian, had made this totally like not bad, to be clear, but like just pretty uninspiring arcade shooter kind of game. It was very, the kind of thing that I think any of you could make in like, a month or something. And it had made him $100,000 in its first year on Steam. And I thought, that seems pretty cool. So then this kind of turned into like an extended series of like lunchtime meetings and our lunchtime chats where we were talking about in the office, what do you think is like the minimum amount of work that you could do to put a game on Steam and get like an acceptable return, like whatever that would be, right? So we decided we'd all spend a week on our games to to come back to the excellent production conversation. That wasn't true for everyone, but I finished mine in 6 days. And I think, actually, hang on, I'll tell you exactly what it's made so far. You can see why I can afford these flashy bulbs. Wait to hear this. It has made,
And this is Starship
in-
Clicker.
yes, in what, 4 years? $395. I know.
I got
No, I
four
know.
bulbs.
That's very intimidating, but you can do that too. And it made all of
Better
I
than
think most of
nothing.
that money in the first month. So it came out cash positive. Like the hours I spent on it, it was fine. But yeah, so there was just the question was just like, how long can we spend on it? What's going to happen? It'd be really interesting to see what happens in terms of like, does one of our, we had like 12 or so games, I think, in the package, or in the group. One of them might be like a crazy breakout success, and it'll just be really weird to say like, oh, we know that you only spent 8 days on that, and it's made you like $10,000 or whatever. Great ones to check out from that list are Snail Track, which is my friend Phil, who actually is a graphics programmer on Superliminal now. And there's like Box Looter. I'll send Harper the whole list. You can go check them out. It's good to inspire you to realize that, you can just put games on Steam and there's like no police. Like it shouldn't be okay, but it's fine. But yeah, so my study of it was, I think as expected, when there's millions and millions of games on Steam, I mean, effectively probably what, thousands? I think there's 10,000 plus games on Steam, maybe. Daniel's nodding his head. Okay, we'll say yes. It's pretty hard to stand out if you've got a small game, right? And then obviously everything over indexes for multiplayer games. So a good example of that would be one of the other games, which is called Drive Shaft, 2 words, was a multiplayer racing game. That one is amazing, just so you can see how much multiplayer stuff you can do in like a couple of days. It is bananas. And Alex, who made that, had pretty good success with it. In like, I think it made him maybe a couple of $1,000, and he spent. We all had like a little like post-mortem, and I think he spent something like $3,000 in total on it. Like he bought a bunch of stuff off the Unity Asset Store, kind of glued it all together and put it out there. And everyone mostly did kind of remixes on that idea. But yeah, so I think what I learned was you can do it. I was just curious if like I could actually finish a game in 6 days and get it out, and it would be like mostly bug free. And it was mostly bug. I think I broke the achievement code, and I've just never, like, I know I should go back and fix it, but I just haven't bothered. But it appears that one of the achievements, I think it's like in the wrong update call, and so it's not really clear when you get it, why you got it. And there's like a forum post on the Game Steam page of all these people trying to like figure out what the like weird way is to get this achievement, and it's like the most straightforward, easy thing. So I just like, oh, it's kind of mysterious. I'll just leave it as it is. But yeah, so the learning was not all games that get put on Steam will make $100,000. That's not a huge surprise. But it was really useful to learn. This is the thing I would stand by the most with the Steam stuff, is to sort of watch how they perform. Like you get to see that when you go on a sale, like when the Christmas sales or whatever happen, surprise, surprise, you do sell more copies, but like you don't sell insane amounts of copies. And you get to go through the experience of finishing like Steam has a little checklist on the back end. I don't know if any of you have dealt with this stuff, but there's like, do you have your capsule art? Do you have a trailer? Does your game have a price? Blah, blah, blah. And you just go through it all, and it's really satisfying. And then it's all done. And then it says like, click this button to release your app. And that's it. And it's spooky and weird. But yeah, that's it. It's not very interesting. Thank you.
On that same note of like putting games on Steam and getting them out there and stuff, what do you have to say about like marketing indie games?
It's a really hard topic that if anyone tells you they know how to do it, they're probably not telling you the truth. I don't know. I think so. We worked with a company called Evolve for most of our PR and marketing outreach for Superliminal. I've known Tom, who runs Evolve, since 2012, I think, give or take. And so I was really excited to work with him. And I'd worked with him before on what did I work on him before with? Mini Metro. When we did the Switch port of that, so we made. I don't know if you ever saw the live action trailer for that, but we worked with Evolve to make that. But yeah, I think that it depends on so many factors. Like, I think that if you're a really small team, I still optimistically believe that the best marketing is to just have a really good idea. I think you need to have something, and I concede that Superliminal is like an unfair example of this, but something that as soon as you look at it, you go, oh, that's cool. And I've never seen that before, and also can't do it anywhere else. Like, that's like a big thing. I was actually had a friend run last night. We were talking about this, but again, this is totally up to you. It's a creative medium. Please do whatever you want to do. But if you want to make really, if you want to like stack the deck in your favor when you're making your project, try not to make something that like obviously already exists. Like, I think it's really, really hard to win that battle. It's especially really hard if you are, group of college friends, like, 5 friends versus PUBG. It's probably a pretty good example. Like, if you're gonna make a battle royale game, I wouldn't recommend it. You need to have a really, really cool idea to make that work. Not to say it can't be done, but if you could pick a fight, I would pick a fight with something else. But so yeah, I think in the independent side, I mean, again, it all depends on your aim. My intention with making games is I always want to make things. I want to attach myself to things that I feel like won't happen otherwise, and that are somewhat. This sounds very highfalutin and very silly, so I apologize in advance. But like, the world is a little bit different after you release the game. Like there's just something there that wasn't there before, right? I think that. What other things could I bully? Like dungeon crawlers. I think it's like really hard to make a dungeon crawler that someone hasn't seen before. That, I think a recent example that was really cool was Noida. If any of you saw that, with like the sort of simulated pixels nonsense, which I remember talking to a friend and saying, I don't think that's going to be enough to move the needle, and he was like, you'll be really surprised. And I was really surprised. I was wrong, so that was good. But that's a tough thing. You're gonna have to find some way to make it. Why is it really interesting to play your game, and why would anyone choose that one over everything else, right? Like, Diablo is a good example too. Like, if you see Path of Exile, like if you want to play Diablo, Path of Exile is a better Diablo than Diablo if you want to just always play Diablo all the time, right? And Path of Exile is free. So if you're going to make a game to compete with Diablo, and it's not as like open to infinite replayability and min-maxing stats and everything as Path of Exile is, you're gonna have a hard time. Like, I hope it works out, obviously, but it's tough, right? So on the flip side, to cater to the art people that are in the chat, I think you're seeing it increasingly at the moment, that there's a lot of games that are really standing out almost entirely based on like just these ridiculously beautiful art styles and like art directions that no one's seen. And I think that's a good idea. Like, go make things that no one has seen before. It's like, I don't know, it's such a low risk thing. Just go try something else, and if it doesn't work out, no one cares. Like, no one notices. I think that's the big thing. A lot of people are like worried about failing, but like no one even knows. Like, you'll just one day you'll release a game that is the #1 seller on Steam, and they'll go like, "Oh, overnight success," and you'll be like, "Thanks, but that's not true." But okay, whatever. Because it doesn't matter. Like, none of it matters. Just do weird stuff more, but with a mind to it making sense. Unless that doesn't matter to you, which is fine. But whatever you want to do is cool.
I hate to cut Harper off because I know he so desperately wants to ask us questions. But I had a quick one. So did you guys do the Switch port for Superliminal in-house, or was that something that you guys like contracted out?
So it was a little bit of a halfway thing. Sorry, Ezra, I had to skip around to find out where you were because I'm only seeing 9 people. I should really just learn how to use Zoom. But anyway, so we worked with and are still working with a company named Play Everywhere, who we've known, they're in Seattle, and we've known them in various capacities for a long time. And they specialize in porting stuff. And we did the weigh up of, did we want to learn how to do this? Or did we not want to learn how to do this? And would it still prove to work out? And it ended up being like, they gave us a pretty good pitch. And the fact that they could put it on Switch and Xbox One and PS4 in one fell swoop was pretty appealing. But that's not to say that we like zipped the package, sent it over to them, and then just walked away. Like there was a lot of back and forth work. And like for the Switch stuff in particular, which I assume if any of your computer scientists, this will not surprise you, but Switch does not run games as well as everything else. So you have to make decisions on what to do with that. And like one of the weird things we actually found recently, and it's funny because the consoles don't have this problem because the frame rate is lower. So I think the console versions play at 30 and the PC version plays at 60. And forgive me if I'm wrong on this, because we went between, it could do any frame rate. Like it was either uncapped and then it was 60. And then I don't know if it went back to uncapped or not. But anyway, if you've got a bad computer and you play the game on Steam, you sometimes can fall through doors because the collision updates just like get slightly off skew for 1 second, and for like 1 second you just are nothing and you just disappear. But yeah, so the console stuff involved, I mean, for again, come back to like the submitting games on Steam thing, there was just the agony of getting through, like learning all of the backends for all of those systems. And of course, every single one is different and they all have like radically different ways of operating. I think it's like Nintendo's has gotten way easier since they released the Switch. They were always notoriously really complex and awkward. But still, like trying to think what it is. I think if you want to put the game on sale on Switch, you have to like ask them if it's okay to do it, and then someone has to approve it, and it has to get approved per region. Like all this stuff is like, you know, it's all there because there's various laws and things like that. But on Steam, you just click the button and then you say like 50% off, go, and it takes, I don't know, 30 seconds. That's how fast your internet connection is. But yeah, in short, the console stuff was, we always knew we wanted to do it. We didn't think it would actually make that much of a splash. Kind of always assumed PC would be the like big leader, which it has been, but the Switch did a lot better than we thought it was going to do. It was surprising to watch it like go up the charts for however many days that happened. I think it was like a week or 2 weeks or something. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, just say something now.
No, that's super helpful. Thank you. I was curious about that. I had played the Switch release and I was very like it was a pretty smooth experience. And I've heard a lot of horror stories adapting games like that to Switch, like games that were, I assume you were just focused on PC, getting that out the door, and then all the console stuff fell in afterwards. So I was just curious about how that process worked out for you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting, maybe we have this conversation again in another 6 months because we're about to try to update it in a big way. So that is a whole bunch of mysterious pain that we're still not really sure if we can do it or not. I don't know if it's changed, but Switch used to have like a limit on how big your updates can be. I want to say like 50 megabytes sounds not big enough, and then 500 sounds like it's too big, but it was something like that. And so we've been very scared about how we're going to update it without that all going wrong. I think it'll be fine, but yeah, it's a known like sore thing to have to do. So we will know about that in approximately 2 months. So we'll see. Who's next?
Just to give a time update, guys, it is about to be 7 o'clock. We don't want to take up too much of Christopher's time.
No, I'm very important.
So does anybody have?
If it helps, I'll give you all 30 more minutes if
Oh,
needed.
so sweet.
Because I was planning on an hour, but I feel like this hour has kind of flown by. Plus, there was a bunch of stuff to fix at the start. So, Yeah, get at me. This is 30 minutes of everyone's lives. Let's not spend it in total silence.
Well, if no one else is going to say anything. You're still running the Indies Workshop? It's still...
If you wanted to pick a bad business to be involved in during a pandemic, a voluntary co-working space is just about the worst decision you can make. But
Yeah.
yes, still
In
What
doing
was
the-
it called?
It's called
Sorry.
the Indies Workshop.
The Indies Workshop in Seattle. Cool.
In the brighter, happier before times, do you have any like success stories from Indies Workshop that are like close to you, like people meeting at Indies Workshop and forming a team, anything like that? Or is it more of like a more private, like, this is my desk, I'm over here?
Yeah, so one of the it's funny you mention it. So like one of the reasons that I wanted to set up the office was that I hate going to co-working spaces. And I hate working at coffee shops anyway. I can't focus in that environment. It's too weird and disruptive, and I don't like it when you like want to go to the bathroom and you're like, do you leave your computer there? Like the whole thing just is not good. Plus the guilt of like how often you're supposed to buy coffees, like there's like no going rate. It's all confusing. But when you go into a co-working space, usually everyone's doing totally different things. And you don't know for sure, I guess, but you don't really have anything in common with them. Like if someone works for, I don't know, pick on someone random. Someone works at Trello, for example, like they probably don't have anything that they can like help you with if you're looking for someone to get assistance from. And for me, part of it, like the best thing about being in an office or being like around other people is that moment when you're kind of like staring off daydreaming and then you realize, oh wait, they already did this. Like, and then you can just run over there and go, hey, when you did like this thing before, and like how did you like what tools did you use and that kind of thing. So yeah, I think initially, I mean, I guess it's very like self-serving or whatever, but Superliminal is probably the story of that because I set up the office. Logan had been he had made Four-Sided Fantasy, you can find on Steam. And he got in touch with Albert, who was living in San Francisco, with, just he did that thing which I recommend, all of you do if it comes up, but just emailed him and said, hey, I think your game is really cool and I had a couple of thoughts about it. Here are some sort of like random ideas for puzzles that I thought would be good. And Albert said, oh, that's cool. Actually, I was thinking of like getting someone to help. So do you want to help? And that was it. And then Albert came up to Seattle to try. They had sort of like a working date for a week, kind of see if they got on and could do stuff. And it worked out. And then a couple of months later, I think a month later or something, Albert moved up to Seattle. And then at that point, I was working at Radial. And then I left Radial. And one night I was sitting in my house. And I can't remember what it was. I got thinking about something to do with the game. And then I messaged Albert, who actually conveniently was living in the same building as me. And so I pinged him and said, hey, can you come over to my house a minute? I want to talk to you about an idea I have for the game. And then that kind of all spiraled off from there. So yeah, that's a good example. In very recent memory, I don't know if this is, hang on, let me check this actually is like in the real world. Because I don't want to step on any toes. Okay, yeah. So if you search on Steam for You Will Die Here Tonight, that is a game that is being made by two people from the office, one of whom just joined about a year and a bit ago. And yeah, he had an idea for a game. He planned it all out. He needed some engineering help. He talked to Alex, who did some UI work on our game, UI engineering work. And they are now buddy. They like signed a bunch of legal documents and they're now working on that game. It's gonna come out at some point. And yeah, like for me, it's like a hard thing. Like I don't think you really like plan for it per se. But that to me was sort of going to be like the test of the office, right? It would be like everyone can work together happily, independently, and that is like fundamentally what all of it's about. always made it clear I didn't want people to feel like they were going to be like pestered all day long with people asking them stuff and whatever. But having that sort of organic, I need art help. By the way, if you're an artist who wants to get infinite freelance work forever, go work in a co-working space with a bunch of people who aren't artists, because you'll just never stop being asked if you can give them months of your time for stuff. We had 2 artists in the office, and they basically had their pick of everyone in the office at all times. People always want like, random concept stuff done, or, working on tile sets and things like that.
It's very
Yeah,
similar
so like
to the
having that
artists
thing
in this club.
What's that?
So that sounds very similar to the artists in this club.
Yeah,
Yeah, we only have like 2 or 3, small handful of us. We're fought over.
it's good. It's a good thing. Yeah, I really wanted. I mean, I always knew it was going to be imbalanced, because especially because Seattle is a very like engineering-y heavy city. I think it's hard to measure right now because the office is so wrecked by what's happened. But at its peak, it was probably about 50 to 60% engineers, maybe pardon me, maybe 20% designers, and then whatever that is, 10% artists. And then if I left out other percentages, just to pretend it all made sense. But yeah, so it's cool. It's good. I like people working together. We try to keep it all fun. A good thing we did for a while actually was having we would do like a GDC talk once a week, where someone from we encourage like to sort of cycle through disciplines, but say like, hey, what's something that you think is super interesting that you've either found through a talk that could be GDC or whatever else, or having people give talks on, hey, I just recently learned how to use Spine, and here's how that went, right? And like that's great, because like I don't know if all of you hate learning myriad new technology like I do, but it's really good when you can just know that someone else already knows how to use it, and you can say to them, hey, did this solve the thing that you were trying to solve with it? Because I have that problem right now, right? And then they go, yeah, that was the answer. So that was really cool.
I've got a question.
Sure.
How did you approach QA to such a mechanically complex game?
Excellent question. Badly, I think it's probably the overarching answer. Towards, so I'm trying to think. So we shipped in November. I would say roughly for about the final 2 to 3 months of the game's development, which bear in mind, we're still sort of vaguely developing stuff for it and things, but in that very painful, oh my God, we have like a million problems, and are we even going to cut this level? We don't know yet, like all that kind of stuff. I would play the game start to finish every single night. And so, I was always clear to the rest of the team, I was like, this is not going to shake up all of our bugs. Like, I don't have time. And also, like, none of us do, right? But like, none of us have time to sort of, do a collision, like just run around every single wall and see what happens, do things like that. We had weird little tools. Like, we had a thing that just, you would navigate the player through the level, like the player model, sorry. And then you could just like shoot physics balls off their body. And so like, it would just report back like what bounced, if anything went through or anything. We used that to solve stuff. We did hire QA. We hired like outsourced QA for the Steam launch. And I think that was like 2 weeks before the launch. And you kind of hit the nail on the head. Like we were sort of debating, should we hire external QA or not? And my fear was we're going to hire them, and it's going to be really hard to like get them up to speed with the game. Because when I remember like even for the first, gosh, I don't know, like 2 or 3 months that I was working on it, I would constantly get like tripped up on things. I would forget that like once you get the mechanic in your head, and it's like probably more in my and our heads than anyone on earth, it's all really intuitive and you can just quickly solve things. But like I still watch people play the game and they think that like dropping it from high up is like how you make it bigger, instead of dropping it and stepping close to it and then dropping it further away. So the QA stuff, we tried to focus mainly on more like functional QA of, do achievements fire, like is it causing crashes, like what's the lowest spec device you can run the game on, and things like that. And then beyond that, we've mostly, pardon me, mostly kind of learned as we've gone. I don't know if any of you played the game at launch, but if you did and you haven't played it since, you should go back and play it now, because you'll see that some of the puzzles have changed, because we got enough reports of people not being able to finish puzzles or getting stuck at. There's one famous part of the game with a series of hallways that increment up from 1 to 5. And I think the version we have now is about as good as it's going to get, but it's gone through like 4 revisions. And patching a puzzle is like one of the weirdest. I'm sure it's happened in other games before, but it's not something that we were ever familiar with. And we always knew that puzzle was going to be like a bad one. but as a good example, that was designed by the guy who had the concussion. So it was it just had to happen. And we knew it was going to get fixed at some point. And it kind of had the whole thing of like, okay, half of us, well, more than half of us think this shouldn't ship, but we've nothing else to replace it with, and we can't have nothing there, so we'll just do that, and we'll figure it out. And then we would watch Twitch with just like hands over our eyes as everyone got stuck on that point. I remember someone thought that if they, so it's like you approach a fork in the road, and then you choose one way or the other, and magic occurs that either makes you pass or fail. But someone thought that if they got to the corridor and then they turned around and then they walked backwards, they could, oh, it was like so crazy. And then they solved the puzzle, but like in a way that made absolutely no sense. And then it was crazy. Like they thought we were like some kind of genius for what we'd done, but in reality, it's a lot simpler than it is. But yeah, so bad at QA is the answer. But my advice to everyone, this is weirdly uncommon, and I was surprised to find this out, but if you don't play your game every day, that's probably bad. Like it's because it's really hard for you to explain to someone else anything about it. And obviously, like the back end of it, pretty intimately at a certain point, but you should be playing it all the time, constantly thinking like, would I care about this game if I wasn't me? And also why, like sort of ask yourself why on everything you're doing and everything that's there. Can be like, why is, like, we have a double jump, why do we have a double jump? Like, do we ever use that? What's it good for? If we got rid of the 3 times that we use it, would that make the game easier to understand overall? Like, yeah, like probably yes, right? But that's the kind of stuff that is good to do. Best QA is done by yourselves, and then get other people to do QA when you are not sure if something is good or bad. That's kind of the best way to do it, when it's very kind of low stakes and exploratory. And then after that, yeah, you just get all your friends or whatever to, you do the like, hey, we got a bunch of pizzas and stuff. Can you just come play the game for a couple of hours and let us know when it breaks?
I do have one other question, but I'll let Harper get to his. I know he has a list somewhere.
Sure.
All right, I'm actually almost dried up, but I do have one more question. I know so you did some work for like Oculus VR and whatnot, and I would assume that that's more of like a AAA type situation. I was wondering how the dynamic changed between indie and AAA.
In about every single possible way that you can imagine, it was different. I don't know if any of you are aware of Facebook, but they have like a lot more money than any game studio, I think. So their approach to problem solving is very different. Their approach to making games is very different. It was really cool. The coolest thing about working at Oculus on the stuff I was working on, which I can't go too into detail on, unfortunately, but was that everyone there, practically to a fault, like maybe let's say 99% of the people in the office were just insanely good. Like they were world class at like whatever the thing that they were doing was. And so it was really cool to work with people who are just really talented. Like, not to be clear, the Superliminal team are all really talented too, but not in a way where like one of the guys who I used to get breakfast with every morning like had done a lot of the special effects stuff for Transformers. So like it was just cool to be like, whoa, that's neat, you know? And how does that apply to like what we're working on? And it was fun because working at Facebook or Oculus, or wherever you want to slice it, while they're working on new hardware and stuff means that you get to see things before anyone sees them. And like the Quest 2, the one that just came out, I haven't confirmed this because I haven't seen the final controllers, but some of the behaviors they have are like based on like these are the hands that tested the controller. Like I would I got pulled in because I had if I can show you here, but I have like very flexible thumbs. so I hold these things in like weird ways and I like hit the buttons like with one thumb. So they were really interested in like, did my weird hands use the controllers right? So that stuff is really fun. And yeah, everyone's smart and there's cool stuff to do. And again, having worked in VR when I worked at Radial, like we were doing all VR stuff. Again, small team, much less money, much more panicky. Versus Facebook was like you get to learn from people. Like the team I was on were the people who had all done. If you've ever used an Oculus Rift or done any of the sort of intro things, that's the studio that I was at, was like the studio that makes all those. So they were just great and they had multiple years of experience in VR, which is kind of hard to find. So it was pretty cool to be there. And then COVID happened and we all moved home. And then I worked on, I don't know if I can say what I worked on then. No, I don't know. But I didn't do the thing I was doing before. And then it was actually interesting in a different way. But then Superliminal was coming out on consoles. And I thought I would rather put all my focus on the one that like I own. So so I did that.
And then the other question I had, which
Mhm.
is a bit of a broad question, but how do you feel about game length?
It's good. I think it's a good thing.
Because I
Can be
felt like
bad.
Superliminal was kind of, it's a bit shorter, but more dense gameplay than a lot of
Yes.
games that get released.
So who knows what'll ever if it'll ever happen, but Logan, the once concussed, now non-concussed level designer, he and I have been sort of openly long haul discussing everything we hate about open world games for so long. I think coming back to how valuable everyone's time is, I think that like I think at a certain point in your life, like a 200 or 300 hour game is kind of the best thing on earth. And like to come back to like the Diablo Path of Exile thing of like if you just really want to get up to your eyeballs in min-maxing stats and stuff, then like a game like that is great, right? You can put very little money in, you know, maybe $100, I don't know, lifetime, and get like thousands and thousands of hours of fun. But my personal feeling is I would rather just get like lots of bang for buck. So like with Superliminal, it's funny, like the most common complaint we get is that the game is too short, which I think is actually a compliment and not a complaint. And we get people saying things like, oh, like you introduce things, then you like never do them again. And I'm like, well, why would we do them again? If you want to do them again, just restart and do it again. Like there's no need to keep repeating it. Like we show you a cool thing and then you're like, wow, what was that? And then something else happens and you go, whoa, what was that? When I was designing the like overarching how do we get this game out the door plan, I actually did something which I didn't know if it was going to work out, but I kind of thought, what's the worst that could happen? And so I did like a competitive analysis of every game on Steam that was like a first person, anything that kind of fell into like first person puzzle, like, you know, that kind of, you know, walking sim stuff was in there too. And then did like what's the median game length, what's the median Metacritic score, what's the median price, and all that kind of stuff. And then just said, okay, we're going to make a game that's $20 that lasts about 3 hours and it should get a Metacritic of just over 80. And we came out at 74 on PC, and I think we're 80 plus on all the consoles. So I guess that works. That seems like a very bad way to work on a game though, but it did actually work. So I have to say that. But yeah, I don't know. I just think things like something like Spider-Man or whatever, where there's like such a beautiful city, and like the fact that like, you know, with the new PS5 thing, they're like able to just, because they got all the fast loading, they can just kind of move you around the city. Like that kind of stuff is so awesome. But then having to collect like backpacks that are scattered around the city, to me, is just like, I don't know who that's for. Like no one does that in the real world, or thinks about doing that. So like, why would they ever want to do it in a game? I don't know, but that's just me. I'd rather find out like, how do you make an open world really interesting? Like, how do you make the idea of an open world make sense in a way where something like, you know, like I guess like the ultimate open world game at the moment is probably something like Skyrim. You know, it's kind of just been going forever, and everyone, you know, but the idea that you go into a world and like there's people that have lives, and you know, all this kind of stuff. You think of games like Shenmue or Deadly Premonition, even like slightly more recently, where, you know, people have schedules and their lives have little things that happen, and you kind of get to like that stuff is super fascinating, right? So how do you do that? Like, how do you scale that up to, like, if you imagine being in New York City playing like a Spider-Man game, and every single character in the game has like a full actual life and like all that kind of thing, like that's such a level of simulation that I think computers would melt. But there's probably a way to do it. You know, at this point, we got all these cloud computers up there. We could use them to compute some stuff. I don't know. But yes, that's my feeling. I think game length is very subjective, obviously. You know, I think there's lots of problems with like, people will happily spend $20 to go to the cinema and see a movie, but we'll spend $20 in a game, and if it's not 10 hours or more, then it's not worth it, which is weird. But I also get where it comes from. So yeah, I guess when making a game, make it as long as you think it should be, and then don't make it any longer than that. That's probably my takeaway. But yeah, if you want to make a million-hour long RPG, I mean, people love them, so can't fault it.
For reference, how long is Superliminal purported to be? Like, how long do you guys think Superliminal is?
Yeah, I mean, it's very much like how long is a piece of string, 'cause it's like, depending on the size of your brain, you'll like solve it.
I just have to
fast or
decide if
slow.
I have to go tell my roommate that we're stupid. That
We
melon
intended it
puzzle
to be
alone
about,
took us like 2 hours.
yeah, we intended it to be about 3.5. That's what we were. That's what we were
Okay, Ben, we're dumb.
How long do you say it took you?
That melon puzzle, it's like the only, like the door puzzle was a snap. Really similar to like a Neopets puzzle from like 2002. So I was like, oh, go there, go there, go there, go there. First try. The melon thing with the fan in the room.
Oh
Probably
yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
a full 2 hours, but felt like it.
yeah. You know, you could. There's another way to solve that where you can turn around. Oh, you know
Don't.
about the fire alarm?
Don't tell me there's another way to solve that puzzle.
Yeah, wait, no, please do. I got stuck on that one too. You like, I played it a while ago. I forgot what you were talking about, and it just hit me like a load of bricks. That room took me hours.
Okay, welcome to the Superliminal walkthrough guide 2021. So that puzzle is quite hard to intuit. But if you cannot intuit the solution, because everything you're clicking is cloning, and when you click the apples, they get blown away by the fan. So you can't get them up, although you can if you learn how to do it. But if you turn around when you're up by the button, there's a fire alarm that if you just keep clicking it, you can just draw a white line all the way over to the button. And I will tell you, that is the first way I solved that puzzle before I learned how you actually solved it. So it's valid. That's our take on it. We often have people asking us, you know, because the game, I mean, most puzzles are pretty like dry in terms of like there's a solve and a nothing else solves it. And because of the, I think, I guess you'd say like analog, like the sort of continuous nature of the way things resize, nothing is like lockstep or anything. There are weird and wonderful ways to solve puzzles, and we've watched people. If you don't care about Superliminal, this is not compulsory homework, but if you do, you should look up the IGN video. That's me and Logan and Albert watching someone finish the game in like 20 minutes. And it's astounding. Like there's stuff that, like, there's just things that we never thought of. And we were always very open to like, however someone wants to solve it, that's great. There's like in the first level, there's a puzzle that you know, is like our lesson, and like you've got to remember to look up sometimes. So like there's a medium height wall, and you have to drop the block over the wall and drop it onto the button and then get through. And the other way you can solve that is you can make the cube large enough that you can get on top of it, and then you can look down at the cube, and then if you learn the correct combination of double clicks and spacebar and jump uses, you can keep jumping up in the air, grabbing the cube, resizing it larger, landing on it, jumping up, resizing it larger, and then you can jump over the wall and then just walk out. And you know, that's cool, whatever you want to do. Like, we wanted to reward, you know, because again, if assuming you finish the game, but like the sort of overarching ethos of the game, right, is like learning to look at things from a different perspective, oh, and solve them. And so like as long as you're doing that, that's good.
We've got
That's it.
5 minutes left. Not sure if we can squeeze a question in that time,
Bet you
unless
can.
anyone has anything small.
Bet you can. Come on, don't let me down. Someone ask a question.
I guess I've got a small question.
Yes.
So how difficult was it to introduce like the concept of superliminal, like that game mechanic, to like new players who have like never really messed with it before?
So that's the entire first level of the game, is basically trying to get people to get familiar with what is going on and how things are working. So if you go through that first level, every single room is like another new part of trying to show you how it works. I mean, it would be remiss of me to say that, like, you know, we never looked at Portal, we'd no idea how they did it, but like a lot of it was like looking at that similar thing of like, once you show someone, okay, you know, you can shoot a thing on a door and walk through it, great, all right, you know, let's do that a bunch of times. Now, oh wait, if you shoot something on the ceiling and then fall through, you'll, like, you know, physics, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we had lots of stuff like teaching you that everything has real physics, teaching you that like big things can become very small things, like there's a room you walk into where the cube is sort of about the size of the whole room, and the only button that you can hit is a tiny little like recessed gap in a wall. And so then you realize, oh wait, if I make things really small, then then you're like learning to control stuff. And so almost everything there is trying to teach you, okay, you can also do this. Like there's the one with like the 2 buttons and the exit sign is really good. Because that really stumps people for a while until they realize, oh wait, it doesn't have to sit on just one exit sign, it could just sit on both, and then that would also solve it. With the rest of the game, I think we'd lean a bit more into, I think Albert used to always describe it as he wanted the game to feel like it was like slapping you in the face, but in a way that wasn't irritating. So it's like, so that like the hardest thing for the rest of us to solve was what Albert meant by that and how that actually would work in practice, because a puzzle game is frustrating by nature. Like it's tough and it makes you feel stupid, and so there's a lot of reluctance to play them anyway, because you go, oh, what if I'm like bad at it? Like no one ever wants to play a puzzle game in front of anyone else, because it's just like feels like someone's like watching you do an IQ test or something. But yeah, we always wanted that thing of, we just kind of show you a thing and then you go, whoa, what was that? And then, you know, you'll never see it again and it changes. And so like it's more about leaving you on that back foot of like you're a little bit off balance, and hopefully you're like buckled in for the ride and having a good time. But I think one thing I'll say I noticed from our Steam reviews reception was that some people kind of take umbrage with the fact that they think that like a puzzle game has a very set formula, and that it needs to be like teach you thing and then build on that thing forever. And I think our ethos was more like, what's a weirder thing you could do with the idea of a puzzle game? And so that's maybe a failed thing for us in terms of messaging, but I think mostly it's worked out okay.
And I think that's all the time we have left. Thank you for being here, and thank you for giving us the time. It's been amazing.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries.
Thanks. I got a lot out of this.
Yeah, me too. That was awesome to have you here.
Cool. I'm glad. I hope that all of your lives work out okay in this weird world. This is such a strange time to be kind of preparing to enter the real world, as it were. Assuming you're all kind of close to that point.
Yep,
But
sadly.
it'll be all right. If anything, just relish this rare moment in your life when never going outside has like no stigma attached. I'm really comfortable with that idea. So it's kind of be nice in its own way. But yeah, I recommend that you all split up into groups of like 2 or 3 and then just put stuff on Steam. Pollute Steam with your game ideas, and
That's what we
It's pretty
try to
much
do.
what we try to do every semester, but the whole finishing your project part is the hard part.
Mhm.
Especially
Yeah.
whenever we're all full-time students and blah blah blah, excuses, right?
Yep. Well, yeah, I mean that's to come back to Christian's question about the like how much planning is good planning. Like maybe take the time to just go, all right, what's the smallest scope of game that's not just like one screen,
Exactly.
one control or whatever, right? And then just make that and get it out there. No one's gonna notice, and it feels good when it's out there. So that's that's my advice. But yeah, thanks for having me, and you all seem like good folks. I think it's all gonna be okay. Don't worry about it.
All right. Well, thank you.
Yes, thank you for coming.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.